The war is happening in Ukraine, but the consequences for the rest of the world could be absolutely terrifying. If you think that I'm exaggerating or that I'm crazy, don't worry. In this video, I'm going to bring you numbers, facts, articles, and then you're going to decide on your own whether hyperinflation is an actual possibility for our dire times. And if you do, then I'm going to tell you what you can do to protect yourself and your family from terrible consequences. Something I learned with my family that actually went through the Weimar Republic, which I guess you probably have heard of before. So let's get started. First of all, inflation was already a problem for most countries around the world. Why? Well, some will argue that the Fed has printed way too much money. Others that it's actually the consequence of lockdowns and the pandemic itself, supply chain issues, and so forth. And sure, I personally believe it's a multifactorial issue, meaning there are many reasons behind the rising inflation. But now, well, we have this conflict that is a major addition to the problem that already existed. So let's talk about Russia itself. Maybe you like Russia, maybe you hate Russia, but in the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Russia is a major trading partner for several countries, especially European countries. Let's take a look at the following graph. Well, first of all, take a look at the amount of petroleum, natural gas that Russia actually exports. They also have wheat, for example, which is, of course, extremely important insofar as food is concerned. So, they have a large variety of exports, but what really matters is the countries that are importing goods from Russia. In the case, a large section are actually European countries in pink, as you can see. Netherlands, for example, it accounts for 10.3% of Russian exports. So this tension, first of all, could be problematic for Russians that wouldn't be able to export to countries like Netherlands. But Netherlands itself is going to have problems getting mostly crude petroleum, natural gas from other countries. The price itself tends to rise. And actually, right now, the price of oil has already exploded. As you can see in this other news, oil rises above $105 after Russia attacks Ukraine. It's not really a surprise. The United States and Europe have promised the toughest sanctions on Russia in response. If sanctions affect payment transactions, Russian banks and possibly also the insurance that covers Russian oil and gas deliveries, supply outages cannot be excluded. What that means is if you live in Europe, well, gas prices will likely continue to rise, and they are already extremely high. But the thing is, it also spreads throughout the economy because oil is used to produce electricity in some places, as also something that's used for industrial purposes. So it's something that doesn't really just stop at transportation and paying more for your gasoline. Ironically, oil prices were already high. This recent article that was published a few days ago, it's saying the following: campaign against oil and gas investments is short-sighted, Saudi energy minister says at IPTC 2022. The most important part is the following. The Saudi minister said, nonetheless, the world may not be able to produce all the energy needed for economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic as investments in fossil fuels lagged behind. So now, with the situation in Ukraine, that really it's only getting worse. And in terms of production, well, you can see here that the United States is the leading producer of crude oil, but Russia is the second one, and then you have Saudi Arabia. So it's a really sensitive place. And insofar as natural gas is concerned, well, Russia again is number two. only behind the United States. And as you may know, natural gas is utilized by many countries, especially in Europe, and it doesn't stop there. Russia is also a major producer of wheat, which, as you may know, is utilized in several products, in several foods. So that's also very concerning. But not only that, then the largest producer is also China. And you think, well, but China is not Russia. China is not really doing anything in Ukraine. But you may have heard that China seems to be aligned with Russia. It is supporting some of the things that Putin has said. And also, at another time, they may even consider an escalation in Taiwan, which, of course, would also bring even more instability and inflation to the markets. Another terrible news is that fertilizer shortages due to Russia-Ukraine tension may hit the United States growing season. As you may know, Russia is a low-cost, high-volume global producer for all major fertilizer, and it's the world's second largest producer after Canada of potash, a key nutrient used on major commodity crops and produce. A senior analyst was interviewed by Bloomberg, and he said the following: fertilizer prices are at all-time highs. This is really just adding more pressure. It's a very real possibility we see shortages for this coming year, especially heading into the North American growing season. Ironically, another country that's extremely important insofar as fertilizers are concerned is Belarus. Also contributing to turmoil in fertilizers markets is the force majeure declared last week by a Belarusian potash miner, largely due to U.S. sanctions and being cut off from global markets. As you may know, the president, the dictator, the leader of Belarus has supported Putin many times, and insofar as this conflict is concerned, I'm sure he will be on the side of Putin. And as a consequence, the production of fertilizer coming from Belarus will certainly be impacted. So that's also a terrible thing if you think about food. And ironically, guys, rising food prices, as you probably know, it's not something that started yesterday. It has been going on for quite some time. Some countries are dealing with this in a quite extreme fashion. For example, here's an article from Bloomberg from 2020. Countries rush to hoard food as prices rise and COVID worsens. Of course, now COVID is better, but the situation in Ukraine could again bring even more pressure. So a country that really caught my attention was Kenya. Kenyans are now using a hashtag, lower food prices, to compel the government to slash food prices. Life is hard. You may think, well, this is never going to come to my country where I live, in Europe, even in the United States. But remember, these prices are globally determined. There are some local differences, but still, most of these food companies are exporting if you live, for example, in the United States, in Latin America, and so forth. So be careful, be watchful. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that these warnings that I bring, they're just exaggerations or attempts to get your attention with clickbait. But I'm going to give you an example. Do you remember this video that I posted? Exactly 1 month ago, I published this video talking about how Michael Burry was betting big on a war in Ukraine. And actually, I was right. My analysis was right. Michael Burry was right. And I invested in the right things. I shorted the right things. Right now, I'm enjoying a little bit of money. But a lot of people thought I was crazy. Some people told me that it was cringe. I leave it up to you to decide whether hyperinflation will come or not. But if it is coming, here's how you can prepare. And I've learned this from my family that, as I described in this video, went through many periods of hyperinflation beginning in the Weimar Republic. First of all, buy what you need, meaning stock up some food that you know you would need for a couple of months or your family. Then buy a surplus of it. Try to store it in your house. You think, why would I do that? Well, buy foods that won't rotten. A good choice may be rice, maybe actually some canned meats like tuna, like sardines. It really depends on where you live in. And then find a nice place, store that stuff, and you're gonna see that if hyperinflation comes, this is better than gold, okay? It's harder for you to actually move the amount of food that you have, but if you stay in the same place, and it's likely you will in a situation of hyperinflation, but if you just store that food that won't rotten for a couple of months, even some years, you may actually make an extraordinary amount of money. And some people will say, well, that's unethical. That's not really good. But, it's a reality. It's something that may happen. And so I would rather be on the side of actually winning, of actually profiting than, suffer. Not only that, I mean, it's better to have the option, to have the alternative than, relying on those terrible long queues of people all starving, begging for food. Prices will rise. Now, if it's going to go to the level of hyperinflation, nobody knows, right? I think CBDCs would get implemented before something like that happens. But even if hyperinflation doesn't come, there's something very valuable in buying foods like that, which is if you can actually store it properly, if you can actually eat that food after a year, for example, you're going to save some money. Personally, that's what happened with me. I like really nice food that usually is quite expensive. So I bought it a year ago, a year and a half ago. I stored it properly. And now, if I had to actually buy it again, it would be around 50, sometimes 70% more expensive. So even if you don't need to get that food to survive, at the very least, you're going to save some money. And I'd rather be prepared than being sorry. And before you go, please leave a like down below. Comment what you think. Comment if you agree with me, if you don't think that there's going to be hyperinflation. And subscribe if you haven't already. YouTube has shadow banned my channel. It is not recommending it anymore. I knew it was going to come. I thought maybe I would have some time before it happens, but nowadays it's really hard to spread the truth, and that's why I need your help to do that. I'll make the videos, and you help me with sharing, with liking, and everything else. In any case, have a blessed day, and I see you in the next one.